Welcome to the International Teacher Podcast with your host, Matt the Family Guy, Kent the Cat Guy, and me, Greg the Single Guy. We are recording episodes from around the globe to tell you about the best kept secret in education. That's right, it's teaching overseas. We're glad to have you join us.
Oh, here we are.
Introduce us.
Another school year.
Get us started.
Hey, Kent the Cat Guy here with Greg the Single Guy. Matt the Family Guy is still missing, but we hope he'll join us again soon. And here we are starting our, what year teaching for you, Single Guy?
Oh, this is my 23rd, I believe. How about you?
I think this is 20.
Yeah?
I think this is 20, 19 or 20. I've been saying 20 for like 3 years now. This has got to be 20, 19 or 20 this year.
Because it's coming up pretty quick.
Yeah.
Right? But we're just at school already prepared, sort of, well, not working too hard, but preparing for the new school year to come along. And it would be a great episode just to talk a little bit about summertime issues.
This is our summer catch-up episode and our launching into the new year. We're going to have a little fun. We'll talk a little bit about the book that you published. Nobody knows about this.
Nobody knows
this book
about
that you published. You've sold 4 copies. So we're going to talk a little bit about the book that you published a couple years ago. And a little bit of summer and a little bit of New Year. What do you think?
I love it. I think that's about as much format as we've ever had in a show.
Gosh, I feel this is what happens when we go on vacation. We come back organized.
We come back way too organized. I mean, that's a plan for a whole show right there.
Right.
I mean, we've never done that before.
Let's start. How was your summer, Greg?
Oh, I had a great summer. You know, and international teaching is the best because I split up my year between summer and school year, just like they do in the States,
Yep.
right? Now, our current school, we don't necessarily have as much time off as the other schools, but most schools go with that whole, Christmas off, summer off type thing, right?
What do most international schools do traditionally? 10 weeks of summer usually?
Like from mid-June to maybe the 1st of August, some schools, and some schools go later, but they don't go all the way usually till September 1st, like summer school, like schools in the States. But they do go at least till August, and usually the first week of August is when people are returning to their schools across the seas. I would say, I haven't been to every school, right? We're talking generalities here.
Mm-hmm.
But how was my summer? Let's see. I had a quick 12 days.
Yeah, it was a real, what do you say, a real...
Flash in the pan?
Flash in the pan, 12 days. Tell us about it.
Oh my God, it was great. I flew back to Florida because my parents live down there now, right? And shout out to the Rents. But the first thing I did was I flew into Miami and I saw a friend of mine I have not seen in 10 years, back from Venezuela days. He was a local sort of down there, and now he's married and has a child, and I left him. He was single and having a great time, but he left the country and went to the States. Met them in Florida, in Miami, right? And little Miami is so hilarious because right around Miami Airport is this little Venezuela area. Everything, everywhere you go in, Venezuelan flags, Venezuelan food, Venezuelan beer. So we just sat out for a couple days and did that. Then I drove over to the western part of Florida, over by Fort Myers, and picked up my buddy Joe. A shout out to Joe. He's the Dignify podcast. It's fantastic. You get a chance to hear that.
Is that the link that you sent me?
Yeah, that was the link that I sent you.
No, I haven't listened. What is Joe's podcast? I didn't listen yet.
Well, it doesn't do any good if I tell you about the podcast. Why don't you listen to it?
The audience should know that most of your emails I don't actually read.
No, I don't read any of yours either.
I just come to school the next day and ask you about them.
Have you read my email? Okay, this is what it was. So listen to that podcast. It's a great one. So Joe and I sat down. We do a regular annual thing. Hang out, we float down a river and share ideas. And this year, his sister was so awesome. His sister lives down in Naples, and she took us in a boat around Marco Island, and I've never done it in boat before. I've always been on Marco Island, never in a boat around it. Fantastic. That lasted 1 or 2 days, and then 2 or 3 days, and then I went and stayed with my parents. My dad turned 80 years old, so we built this little model together for a couple days and taught my mom a little bit more technology. Had a fantastic time with them. Then I did the Cannonball Run, or maybe you could call it the Smoking the Bandit Run. I went from Naples, Florida, in the southwest Florida, all the way up the Panhandle, all the way over to Fort Worth, Texas, and went and saw my nephew in a a new Broadway musical called Hadestown. My nephew is the understudy for the lead for Orpheus. And if you haven't listened to Hadestown, if you like the Broadway music, definitely download it on iTunes. It's great. Hadestown it's on Broadway right now in New York. And Broadway, I don't know if you know about Broadway, Kent, but the Off-Broadway is the show that travels around the U.S. and Canada. And they do different shows for a week or so or 10 days in each different big city around the country.
So this is your nephew. So your nephew,
My
this
nephew,
is his
Colin
job.
Lemoine, the
He
next best.
dances, he sings,
yeah.
he acts. Is that part
Does all
of
of
this
it.
role? Yeah.
He does all of it, and he knows every part. He's so fantastic. So shout out to Colin.
Nice.
Proud of you. And once I did that, I did that in 18 hours. 18 hours of driving straight. But I listened to podcasts straight through. It was great. I wasn't even tired. I don't drive in this country, ladies and gentlemen. I don't drive here. I drive a moped. And when I go somewhere longer, I usually have a driver, right? Kent, we've done that before. We go over to Bahrain or we go to another country, we get a driver to take us.
That's right.
So since I don't drive here, it's sort of a novelty back in the state. I got to see my nephew in 2 different shows, afternoon matinee and then the evening, and he stood in and did the lead for Orpheus. Fantastic. The next morning, I woke up and went to Houston, said hello to my tax man. I've never met my tax man before. Have you ever met your tax people?
No, I've never met my tax people. I have tax people. I've just never met them.
You got a guy. Yeah, I have a tax guy in Houston, and he did all my back taxes. As far as the government knows, I've been paying my taxes all along and reporting them. But
Did you get
according
hit by
to
a
my
bill?
tax guy,
did you have to pay?
well, no, they pay me, actually. They owe me money but they want you to report, right?
Yeah.
You have to report your taxes. I wasn't doing that for many years, but I've caught up now. Met him in Houston for the first time. That was nice. And nice shout out to Jim. Then, of course, I went to the airport and flew back home, back to Saudi, now home.
Here you are.
How about you? How was your summer?
Well, I took twice as many days as you did. You did your U.S. romp in 12 days. I did it in about 24, just about 24, 20 to 24 days. My wife and I spent our time at our hometown, Bellingham, Washington. And once again, loyal listeners will know that last year
Do we have loyal listeners?
Your mother.
My mom.
Your mom. And I know your dad now. Our listeners don't know that I've met your dad, talked to your dad.
Yeah,
when
I think
he was
Dad's
on the boat
on here
last
too,
year,
right.
And really nice guy.
Great
really
guy.
nice guy. So if he's looking to adopt a better looking son than he's got now.
Hey, well, we'll have to ask him after the
Ask him
episode.
about that,
We'll
would
call
ya?
him up.
So we spent our summer in Bellingham, Washington. Beautiful weather every single day, 70, 75, nice and sunny. And it's right on the Bellingham Bay, which is kind of that Pacific Ocean there.
Listen, just saying, if he adopts you, can I go live in Seattle then?
You can live in Seattle and I'll spend time with your parents. Sounds fair.
But your cat's going to drive me crazy with my allergies.
And I try not to take my summers too long, and people will be wondering, well, why only 24 days? And that's because
That's what I was wondering.
Have a cat. I do have a cat. My wife and I am the cat guy. And I think, honestly, the cat gets lonely when we're gone. It's just her. And so I usually take shorter trips so that she's not left out.
But you had somebody take care of Nunu while you were gone, and I didn't.
We don't just
You had a
shut her
local
in.
guy.
But, listen, just because someone drops by every day and cleans the litter box and puts some food and water in the bowl doesn't mean that she doesn't get lonely during the day.
Right.
So I was happy to get home. My wife is still in the States. But we just had a casual. We threw a block party again. We have 36 neighbors right now. And every year for the last 2 years, that's exactly right. 2 people showed up. But we papered the neighborhood again with flyers. We went door to door. And again, people opened the door like we were somehow, the sheriff ready to evict them or something. People are very weary of people who knock on the door who aren't wearing a UPS outfit. So I have now bought a UPS outfit.
Now, wait a second. When you said you put flyers out, you mean like staple them to the telephone poles and wanted signs and stuff?
We knock on the door and hand each neighbor the flyer. And we had we've done this 2 years in a row now.
That's why they didn't show up. They saw you.
Well, my wife says that we only gave 2 days notice. We threw the party on a Sunday, and we put out the flyers on Friday. And my wife says it was just not enough notice. And I think, well, I think maybe just our neighbors don't like us that much. So
I agree with your wife. I think you're a nice, likable guy, and you're not too scary. And if you're with your wife when you knock on the door, they won't, call the police. So I think that's nice. I think that they showed up because they didn't show up because they didn't have enough time to, summertime. People have things to do.
People are busy. You know what? They're not like me, and not everyone's on vacation all summer like we are. And so I think people are busy, but it was nice because we did get an invitation for the 2 people that showed up. We had a party at their house.
I have an idea.
What is your idea?
How about they have this new thing called email, and what you could do is instead of a flyer, it's a digital form of a flyer, right? I don't know if you've heard about these before, but you could actually write an email sort of like a flyer and let them know months ahead of time that you're coming back into town at these dates, so that they could sort of put those on their digital calendars and actually get reminders that it's coming up. And that way, so I don't know if I could show you how these emails work.
How
if
these
you want.
emails work? I'd
Right?
really appreciate that.
We could do something like that. And I think it's just nice and polite, and you get a better turnout, I think. Next year, if you take my advice, which is free, by the way.
Well, who's going
right?
to pay for it?
You can.
Which brings us back to the book, but we'll talk about that.
That was a low blow.
We'll talk about that later. I apologize.
I guarantee you, how many people are in your neighborhood?
Well, we have 36 units, and so roughly multiply that by 2.
So 72
75
people. Well, 36
Yeah,
times 2
72
is that.
technically.
Okay.
There's a kid or 2 running around.
Okay, so 72 and a half people. I think you're going to have 60 people at your next party if you email about a month ahead of time or 2 months ahead of time. Let them plan it.
We do have a Facebook group for our neighborhood. We have something we set up a Facebook group. We've got about just over half of the 36 units on the Facebook group. And we did succeed in one thing. We put the Facebook group on the flyer, and we got 5 new people to join the Facebook group. So
and you
4
handed the
more
flyers
people.
out.
We handed the flyers out.
But if you did it opposite that, if you did Facebook and then sent the flyer out on Facebook, I think you'd have all 72 and a half people there.
Well, we did get 2. And again, we got an invitation, and we had a very
quaint.
nice evening. One of our neighbors is a local realtor. He owns one of the units next to ours. And he has a podcast and a YouTube station where he broadcasts the local community, drumming up some business for his real estate business. And so it's real nice. The number of people out there creating content is, your buddy Joe creates content. You and I don't know what we create. Let's just leave that to the side. But this guy created content, and I got to see his setup. He's got some nice cameras, some nice lighting. So that was a nice connection. Really enjoyed that. And it was a Bellingham summer. We enjoyed it.
And that's really a wonderful thing, because you've told me a lot about Bellingham. And I think that the more I learn about Bellingham and the more I learn about Seattle, the more I want to go there.
You
Not
should
for
come
the
visit.
coffee.
We got a whole extra room. Come visit. You can use it for 2 days.
That's the other thing about. Thank you, Ken. With the cat litter. Greg, Nunu needs her room back. So
Nunu's never been to Bellingham. We hope she makes it. She's 13 this year.
Well, there's a lot of issues going on here. Number one, I think the idea you invited me to your place, in your experience, when you live overseas, in my experience, I have so many friends that live all around the States and around the world that you can pop in on somebody and they actually mean it. It's not like you meet somebody in an airport in Atlanta and they say, "Oh, you're a great guy," after a beer or two, and you're like, "Oh, you're a great guy. You should come visit us sometime. It's a great town." They don't mean it. But overseas, when we meet somebody, we get to know each other and you get to know other people, you drop in on them.
You drop in on them.
I had a guy from Australia offered to have my friend Mario and I come and visit him in Australia on his farm. And I know damn well he meant it. We never did go there. He was sort of a crazy guy. But I know he meant it. I could go out to Australia and stay with him. That's a little scary. I think that was part of your summer, is that you're going back and you're visiting people. Did anybody drop in on you from school?
No, not this summer. Last summer we had a reunion last summer of some people that I used to work with. Pretty low profile summer this year, but we just had a coworker leave us here, and we'll talk about that in a minute. I don't mean to skip ahead of summer, but one of our dear coworkers is leaving us, and they're going to be in Switzerland. And when they said, "Please come visit us in Switzerland," they really meant it.
They do. And I think every time I have a conversation barring just a few incidents, I have been welcomed in other places. I have gone to visit past and present friends in different parts of the world and in the States. If I had called up, I tried to find Jim in Houston, and I couldn't find. I lost
Another one of our
contact
dear
with him.
coworkers.
Right, and I could have stayed with Jim. He would have been like, "You have to stay with us," right? Or, well, with my case, he probably would have been like, "There's a nice hotel nearby."
There's a garage. You can use
Right,
the garage.
or yeah, the cat room. That's one thing about overseas teaching, and is that you get to go back and visit, and you have many different opportunities to visit other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So Bellingham is beautiful. I don't know if our listeners have been to Seattle area, but you talk very highly about that. And you go home every summer for a little bit, don't you?
Go home every summer for a little bit and just enjoy the sun, walk along the water, have some nice meals. We had another
And I have
nice
a quick
meal.
question here.
Yeah.
Did you go to any other countries on your way back or on your way to the States?
This summer, no. This summer we didn't. You know, we had just recently been in the Maldives just a couple months ago before the summer break, so we weren't looking for another overseas stop on the way. We were just looking for, oh, and I should mention that my wife had her lenses put in her eyes, so really we had a task this summer.
Oh, yeah. Sometimes you go
Yeah.
back and have to take care of
we weren't going to travel a lot because she needed to have access to her doctor for the follow-up examinations.
That
So
makes
she got
sense.
like these bionic lenses, paid a little bit extra, got these fancy, fancy lenses. Very nice doctor, seemed like about 16 years old, I don't know. But he did a wonderful job, and her eyes corrected the cataracts and some others. She doesn't even wear glasses anymore. So
That's
that was a big
powerful.
part of our summer, is we took sort of a health break for the summer with her eyes. Mrs. Cat.
They have great
They
hospitals
got a great
in Thailand
hospital,
for that.
lots of great Thai
Lot of
doctors,
tourists.
lots of great British doctors there, I imagine.
Yeah, Cuba too.
Wow.
But anyway, I don't mean to go off topic either. That's your summer. So both of us had a quick summer.
Quick summer. Yeah, pretty uneventful.
I agree. And once in a while, you just sort of fall into work, and your summer might be more eventful. Like, I know Matt, the family guy, they're hitting baseball stadiums. I know he's fishing in the lake, having a great time. That's what their summer's like, about just being with family. And that's what I enjoyed most about my trip, was I was really with family and friends, mainly my parents. Just said, I don't even want to say hi to friends. Don't even tell them I'm coming in the country. When I get there, I just call them from the car, say, hey, how you doing? I can't see you this summer. I'll see you next summer, right?
Ah, you're a good son.
I am. I'm
Until
a good son.
until
and
I
a good-
replace you at home, but that's still another issue.
It's true.
Well, haven't got there yet. We got a new year coming up. This is my favorite time of the year, that sort of quiet time. We got about 2 weeks before we
the
all come
new
together.
teachers show up.
Well, they've already started to roll in. You and I were yucking up with a couple of them today.
In fact, now is about the time that new teachers are going to other schools around the world.
That's right.
The first week
That
of August.
first week
type,
of August is when
right?
people start gathering.
Do you remember your first orientation? When you land as a cohort, or you land and you don't know anybody, but they land and they sort of group you together, you find your housing, and they sort of do some training at most schools for the first week when you land?
Yes. Yes-ish. My very first school was very small, so there was only like 5 or 6 of us who rolled in new that year. And we didn't have an extensive program. Mostly it was around a new behavioral program they were doing. But here, when we arrived here at this school, we had a large cohort, 35, 40 people rolled in new, and we had a good solid 2 weeks of classroom time with training.
Okay, yeah, I'd say it's a big topic, and we could do that some other time. And right.
Why don't you say a few words to our listeners about what are you looking forward to? You know, every year is sort of a rebirth, a renewal in our business. What's the new year bringing you?
Oh, true that. This year, I'm just going to really focus on, I don't know, every year I focus on something new, some kind of a new teacher issue, and this year it's going to be a technology year. So I'm going to work on technology with the students. It's a little bit, every year changes in overseas, that you don't always teach in the same room, you don't always teach in the same job, and I'd say that's across the board around the world. There's no, you show up and that year they decide you're going to move you into a different classroom, or maybe you'd learned that at the beginning of the summer before you left. But boy, I'm glad I'm not moving this year. I've moved a couple different summers.
Well, and you don't just have the regular classroom, you have the technology, you have everything, the maker space, the technology space, the computers, It's a big job if you move from one place to the next.
Right.
Yeah. So, what kind of mental and physical preparation did you undergo getting ready for the new year?
For the new school year?
For the new school year.
I've been sitting here talking to you.
Well, that's important. Okay, so talking to your coworkers and having a little bit of downtime, learning about each other. I mean, we continue to learn things about each other.
Yeah, I've learned
We
too much about
continue
you.
like we've been talking music. We talked 80s music the other day. And I think that is so important. If you roll into a school and you get a chance to just talk to your coworkers, don't just talk about the reading program or the math program or the tech program. Actually spend a minute and find out what kind of people you're working with.
Yeah, get to know if they're from Bellingham or not.
That's right. Well, you'd be surprised. There's like 5 people around this area who are from Bellingham.
Well, I just met a few new teachers just now, and of course, part of it was they want to get moved in, they want to settle in, they want to get all their stuff organized. So I said, just take it easy and sit down and talk for a while. So we did.
You know what? I do think that when you're the new kid at a school, there's a certain level of pressure to perform. I mean, you got the job, but then there's a certain level, there's a certain pressure for you to sound competent,
You have to prove yourself.
prove yourself to the veterans. And for me, I can understand that. I mean, we've all been there. I understand that. But I'd say take a breath. And this is advice that I'd give to my younger self. Take a breath and just be a human and get to know people on a person-to-person basis. There'll be plenty of time to prove what you can or can't do. You got the job, so no one's interviewing you anymore. But just get to know who these people are.
I agree. I think it's a lot of fun to meet new teachers, and it's a small world. We keep saying that. But these 2 new teachers sat down with me today, and we talked about teaching at XYZ school. And we already had 4 or 5 names. 4 or 5 names already knew each other by proxy,
Small world.
right? We'll take a moment's break now to remind you how to reach out to us. Of course, you can address any negative comments to Kent, the cat guy. We do love to hear from you. If you're out on Facebook, we don't do that, but our handle on both Instagram and Twitter are at ITPExpats with an S, ITPEXPATS. As a handle, if you want to, you can send us an old email at internationalteacherpodcast@gmail.com, or you can visit us at our new website at www.itpexpat.com. www.itpexpat.com. Well, back to the show. What are you looking forward to this summer? This new school year, excuse me.
Well, like I said, this is the rebirth time for me. I always try to focus on one school thing. You know, I don't spend my whole summer going to reading and writing workshops. I don't spend my whole summer preparing and thinking about the year. But this last couple of weeks, I have been finishing up this training on this letters program, which is kind of a new take on literacy and reading. They call it the science of reading. Without going into a whole discussion about that, I'm preparing myself to try a few things out in language arts. You know, every year I try to do 1 or 2 things different, and I think that's going to be my thing. So I've been spending several hours completing this course. The course is interesting. It keeps my brain going. I do need credits for my certificate, my Washington State certificate. Still needs credits to renew every 5
And
years.
that's important. Everybody has
Yep.
to, you have to keep all your stuff updated,
Yep.
especially your teaching certificate.
So I'm going into the year with that kind of being my new thing. But other than that, I'm just looking forward to getting to know the kids. And I'm wondering, every year since the pandemic sort of waned down, 1 year, 2 years now, it's the kids have been a little bit anxious about school, in my opinion. I don't know, maybe you have a slightly different opinion, but I'm wondering what they're going to come in like now, because this year's incoming group of 4th graders spent their kindergarten year learning at home. It'll be interesting to see what their personalities are like. What I always like to get to know who these students are. Of course, I'll teach them things at some point, but it's always an exciting part of the time.
to feed off of that, that's part of the reason I want to focus on technology this year. I talked with our principal, and we decided that for among other reasons, right, going back into some deep tech with the students is going to be important, even if it's just a little bit each week, because there's a gap that was formed, and we've moved away from it towards other things. And I think revisiting the basic stuff will be very important. So I look forward to that. And that's the other deep idea of what I want to do this next year. But I have one reaction to what you're really planning on doing, what you've been doing already to get
Yes.
ready for the new year. And you can read? You're literate? You're learning about reading? How did you learn? Did you learn how to read first? And, just kidding.
You know, it is funny though. Some people know exactly how they learned how to read. I got no idea how I learned how to read. I wasn't the best reader, and I wasn't really into it. Maybe a lot of boys are like that in
You can connect
school.
more to the kids then. I mean, those of us, the best teachers are not the ones that got the straight A's in school. The best teachers are the ones that failed along the way, because through your failure, you learn.
You and I must be great teachers, buddy.
Oh, absolutely. I keep failing all the time. I love it.
So yeah, I'm looking forward. And you know what? You mentioned about the new coworkers. They're a real shot in the arm because they usually come in and they're excited. They're excited to be here. They've got the job. They haven't started that slog of the work schedule yet. So it's real fun to meet the new teachers or even the teachers who came in last year.
And they have the frightened look on their face
doing.
like, oh my God, how do I get my phone started? Or I tried driving today, or I couldn't get to we couldn't get this or that. I love that frightened look of the new teachers that they're just getting into the thing,
There's just so many details that even 6 months after you go through them, you tend to forget them. And here we are, 7, 8, 9 years since we did a lot of these things in this country. So it's easy to forget everything it takes to get a new year going.
Well, I would say that the first year at any school for me is sort of like a brand new teaching experience. And I always sit there, and the first year I'm very quiet and learn and listen and try not to make a lot of waves. And then just sort of, blossom after the first year. The first year you're just trying to get everything in order and find out how things work.
Speaking of new teachers, you wrote a list of advice for new teachers going overseas in your book, Finding the Right Fit, www.amazon.com,
Oh, you're so funny.
or wherever you find your better books. And you did a top 10 list of reasons not to go into international teaching. And I would like to know, I'm going to read off each one that you have on your list, and I'm just going to ask you, does that apply to you? Are there anything from your list that should be like, what's the word I'm looking for here, that applies to you and why you should not be international teaching? So let me ask you from this list. Number 1, you write, fleeing from your problems. Is that a thing for you? Are you currently now running away from anything in your life?
Besides the FBI? No. I'm just starting to remember that list. You're right. That's one reason not to be an international teacher. I totally agree with that, because when people, what I have seen in my limited experience, seeing other people, is that I have met people that are leaving a marriage and they just want to break from they think, I'm going to start brand new. I'm going to leave it all behind me. It'll go away. That doesn't work. The marriage problems follow them. The problem with finances follow you. The problem with, being in trouble with the law might follow you, of course. And for me, the answer is no, I don't have any problems. I'm not trying to escape anything.
Nothing that we know of yet.
Not that I'm willing to say.
I'll talk to my newfound parent, your father, soon. Okay, so here's another one you wrote. Number 2, you wrote, you're just looking for a free European vacation. Would you say...
that's so funny. I've seen that because I've met people that want to say, oh, I want to go to Europe and teach. I've always wanted to be in Germany, and I think I'll just try teaching there. It's not some vacation. The first and foremost thing, Kent, what are you first and foremost, a traveler or a teacher?
No, I'm a 4th grade teacher.
You're a teacher and you're not on vacation.
But I would imagine that some of our listeners over the years who have listened to our travel stories might say, hey, listen, those 2 guys, they're just putting in their time so they can do their travel. And there's just a small grain of truth to that, perhaps.
Well, I have to make an addendum to that statement or how I described it in the book. And I guess I'm just trying to warn people not to do that. I think my other list said do travel, right? On my other list is like a reason to become a teacher overseas. But I think there's nothing wrong with the teachers that are there in the States and they want to try it out and see what it's like to travel and to teach and to just pick up everything and go for 2 years. Maybe it works for them, maybe it doesn't. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'm more of a career teacher internationally. I'm more like I'm always going to be overseas. And I see a lot of people that go over for 2 or 3 years and then head back home. There's nothing wrong with that. I just don't want people to think it's signing up for a vacation. It's like go on a cruise or something and see what it's like to travel, right?
You know, it's funny because here, your last line, you write that, the dream job in Western Europe, teaching Western Europe might be the dream job, but can you afford the salary and the living expense? And we just talked to our buddy who's moving to Switzerland, and he said they're in a lucky position that they can go to Switzerland because they've worked where we're at for many years and sort of saved up, and they're veteran teachers, and they have sort of an advantage living in a very expensive country.
Well, that's another thing, some teaching overseas over a period of time, you can get rid of your debt, right? You can pay off your student loans and all that kind of stuff, depending on what your lifestyle's like. But I think that's over a period of time. And once you start building up wealth, and you can leave a millionaire from overseas. There's friends of ours, they're retired at 50. Mm-hmm. Right, Jacqueline retired at 50, and she's doing her JP Mint consulting out of Mexico.
Big friend of the ITP, JP Mint. Big shout out.
She's a great example of somebody that loved and learned how to manage her money overseas. And maybe she didn't do that back in the States. I don't know her story, but fleeing, like that's on my list. Don't flee if you have problems.
Don't flee your debt.
Don't try and get out of problems that way. But it is, on the other hand, it is an answer. You can make money, but going back to the European thing, you don't go to Western Europe schools thinking you're going to save money, right? It just doesn't work that way. Things are expensive there.
Number 3 on your list, I think, is going to be a big one for us to talk about.
Aren't they all
Number
big
3 on your list is don't go international teaching if you will be lonely.
Oh, yeah.
Right? And I think, without a doubt, particularly with my wife traveling, and we have some other coworkers whose spouse is traveling, there are periods of loneliness in this job, wouldn't you say?
You have to definitely agree with you. You have to know yourself enough to say, I don't have any input from my relatives or my friends next door. No one's just going to get up and, there's periods where no one's going to just say, hey, let's go do this, let's go do that. There's going to be time you are absolutely alone, and you have to be good with that. You can't go down in some spiral of depression because no one wants to hang out with you. I think that it has to be a part of your life is to get to know what it's like to be alone and not be lonely. Even if you're married.
Give our listeners a tip. Let's just say you are working abroad. You're not typically the lonely person, but you go through a period when maybe your work friends have been traveling, they're out of town. What is something that you do in your own life to, really feel less lonely when you have sort of me time?
I do the same thing you do, Kent. I do 2 things. Number 1, I learn something new, right? I just turn things around and say, I got time. I think I'm going to learn the language or where I'm living, or I think I'm going to take a course, or I think I'm going to do something that makes me busy so I don't sit around and think about it. And the other thing is get to know some locals. Right? Get to know some local people and do some things you've never done before.
That brings us to the 4th item on your list, and that is don't don't teach internationally if the cultural differences are going to be too much for you. So let's talk about that for a minute, because you've been in this area of the world for a long time, not just this job, but a previous job. How are you feeling about the cultural differences? Does it get more intense over the years or less intense for you over the years?
I think the cultural differences get less intense because you get more used to them. You become accustomed to people being different all the time.
You know what? I was going to say that surely that you must know expats, and this is probably true of anywhere in the world, who they actually become a little bit more embittered over the years, and little things over the years that our cultural differences tend to set them off a little bit. Perhaps you and I aren't that way. I don't know, but surely cultural differences aren't just something that you experienced in your first year of teaching, but they're something that you think about, I think, your whole time.
Well, that's a tough question. It's not about what I think about cultural differences. It's about what I see other people experiencing, right? Like, I'm straight, I'm a guy, and I don't have problems that somebody that is gay or somebody that's lesbian or LGBTQ or whatever, or even being a woman or being of color. I don't have those problems, and I've never will have those problems unless things change drastically, but I see it with other people and the way they're treated. So if I see how a woman is treated in, for example, some of the Middle Eastern countries, women are treated much less respectfully than men are, right? By men. And that just, maybe it's building up more, right? Maybe I have less fear of speaking out against it sometimes, but I tell you, here's another example. The cultural idea of no line, like mobbing the counter at an airline.
Yes.
I know that's far and drastic compared to, the differences in culture of race and color, but let's just take that one thing. And you ask me if it's bothering me more or less over the years, and I say, well, I don't know, because sometimes I just explode and say, start elbowing grandmothers and stuff like that, and just keeping my place in line, like I'm next, damn it, And other times I'll just sit back and go, look at this wild animal version of trying to get a ticket, right? There's 50 people up there standing, in Malaysia, you just go for an airline ticket and there's this mob of people. And in Germany, you're like standing in line between between certain lines or between certain gates, and you can't go forward until you're told to. And there's so many different ways of doing things, but I guess I'm used to it, and I'm more of an observer than anything. And my observer status changes when somebody's treated wrongly. If one of my friends there is elderly and they're being elbowed by a bunch of young kids to get in line, etc., I'm the first one that's going to be like, no, I'm going to be that loud American that demands things my way, and you're not going to treat her like that. Right? You treat this woman, she's older, you need to treat her nicely, or this man, treat them with respect and get your ass back in line. We're here, right? If it's just me and it's not affecting me, I probably wouldn't. So those are some of the cultural differences that I notice, whether they're racial or if they're just something simple, a culture of standing in line.
Number 5, and I think we'll both agree.
This is so deep. Go ahead.
Number 5, I think we'll both agree that this one probably gets tougher over the years. But you said, number 5, don't teach overseas if you have health concerns.
Oh, yeah.
What do you think? Is that something that's just for the new teachers, or is that something that continually you think about every year?
Well, I think you learn how to live with your health problems, and you discover new health problems, right? All of a sudden, I've got high blood pressure because I exercise so much.
Well, and you're a teacher.
And I'm a teacher, exactly. More gray hair. I guess that's on my list for people that are new to it, that are thinking, I'm going to go overseas, but I have a major health concern, because you're not always going to get the best health care in places. If you're living in Cambodia, for example, where I lived, if you have a heart condition, I wouldn't go live there, because you have to leave the country and go to Thailand to see a doctor before you can actually have something done. Now, it's excellent health care there, but you have to travel to it. It's not like it's around the corner at the clinic, right? You can't have major problems. And I mean, name a major health problem, and you're not always going to have the expediency that you might have where you live in your home country.
And I would say each year, as we get older, as we are, we think to ourselves, and now I know that you are in international teaching for the long haul, but at some point you think to yourself, how long do I go before my health and having to settle down somewhere? becomes an issue. I'm sure that's kind of gone over your mind. 95.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, for me, it's about next week.
Okay, there you go.
Okay, now this is a great one. And so you say, don't teach overseas if job security is your primary concern.
Oh, yeah, that's a good one. I forgot about that.
I think that one never goes away.
I never taught in the States, so I'm speaking from a point of view. Like, I have a friend that's been teaching in the same classroom for 20 some years, 23 years, graduated with me.
Yep.
And she's got job security. She's got not tenure, but she's got security in that school system. I've seen teachers that are just abruptly fired with no reason. There's no one around that's going to support you and try and fight that decision in most of these schools. There's no one on your side. So if something goes wrong, whether you are at fault or whether you're not at fault, whether it's just somebody out to get you, there's things that happen. There are personal issues that go on that you might find yourself out of a job instantly without very little warning.
And to be clear, it could either be a very young new teacher or it could be an old veteran.
Age has nothing to do with it. And whether you've been teaching for 30 years, it has nothing to do with that. They might just say, nope, we don't have a position for you. It might have nothing to do with you. Mm-hmm. But there's there's no way to really go against that decision. And all of a sudden you are your own team. It's like, here I am, and boom, or my husband lost his job, and now I have to go and find something. I don't have anybody to fight on our side, because we're here as a teaching pair. Or my wife is unhappy in her position. She quits because so-and-so did something with her in the administration, and she's not happy. And all of a sudden there's no job security, right? So there's not a lot to rely on. And whether it's founded or ill-founded, as a reason that you are losing your job, there's no way to fight that.
So if you absolutely cannot handle the ambiguity of a little bit of job insecurity, maybe international teaching something to think twice about.
Well, in the States, if you're working at a job and somebody fires you for XYZ reason, I think you have legal ways of taking care of that, right? You also have teacher communities and you have different ways of people defending you and saying you can't fire that person.
Yep.
Put them back in, right? I don't see any of that overseas. And because of that, you have to have your own network of people. So if that does happen, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, I've seen it happen. I've been in it a long time. And so have you. You've seen teachers let go. And in that case, maybe they go back to their home country. Maybe they go look for another job, and they have to, it's sink or swim. There's no one fighting for you, right? So I think that the important thing there is it's about your network. So no matter what, the answer to that, how do we survive that? Well, the answer to that is always have a backup plan. Always have an exit plan. For some reason, you have to leave. It could be even something like, this is interesting. I didn't even mention this. I don't think I mentioned it in the book, but let's say political reasons. Let's just say it's not that you're fired. It's just, let's say your school closes because there's a civil war.
That's happened.
It's happened.
Yep.
And
or
if your country's in turmoil and all of a sudden, wham, you're out of a school because the school is not collectively going to keep going even remotely.
Right.
If it's shutting down for some reason for XYZ months and you have no income, there's nothing else. That is a perfect way of saying you have no job security. Right? So I can't let that go by because that's international. You've experienced it.
Absolutely.
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, my time in Yemen, we got closed down in May because of the conflict between rebels and government. And one day we went to go to school and the tanks were blocking the major roads and the school said, well, I guess we're done.
I saw a tank this morning, honey. I think there's a problem.
And it's called force majeure. And different schools have different ways of reacting and treating their teachers once that's been announced or imposed.
And the ability to, right?
And the ability to. And so our school did a nice job to help us out in a difficult situation at that time.
And I don't want to be scary with this. These are just, well, you and I are really raw about this conversation. We're not hiding anything. It
Yeah.
depends on the school. It depends on the country you live in. It depends on the time that you're living in that country.
Hey, we're on number 7 now, and we haven't got to
We're
number
still on
7
the
yet.
list. Go ahead.
But we are still standing in the international teaching arena.
Without job security.
Despite these 10 things, we're still standing. And this one's going to, this one is going to hit the heartstrings. You say, don't take a job teaching overseas if you're going to miss your friends and family. What do you think?
Well, there's different kinds of people. There are some people that just think they're going to go and teach for 2 years or whatever, and they'll be fine. But everybody has a point in their life that they have to decide whether or not family being with them right there is part of it or not. I think the cool thing is that with technology, things have gotten a lot better. I can call my mom and talk to her for 3 hours on FaceTime. I can call up my brother and say, hey, what are you doing? I can WhatsApp him. I can texting. WhatsApp is big overseas, not in the States very much, but it's getting bigger. But I can get on a text and I can text internationally with him anytime.
But
right?
we have
it's
said
changed.
over the
Are you a problem with your mic?
I promise with my little mic.
Relax a little bit, please.
We have said goodbye to coworkers over the years who, because family health and wellness or the age of the parents, they've made the decision that they were going to go back and leave the international arena. So I think even for veteran teachers, that's still something that people talk about.
I guess that made my top list because I'm very strong with my family.
Yep.
I don't have family problems. We have a very cohesive and close family.
You're about to lose your bedroom to me, but okay.
Exactly, right. But yeah, Dad, don't adopt them. I think
my dad's a doctor.
I think that you have to be secure enough with your family to be away from them for long periods of time. When I made that list up, I was thinking of what are some of the hardest things about living overseas.
Yep.
That is a hardship, even if you're close to your family, even if you have technology. So therefore, I put it on that list because you have to think about it before you go overseas. Can I leave my family? If you can't, and if you can't go long periods of time without being able to just reach out and say, hi, Mom, I love you, or say hi to your nephew or niece, if you can't do that, then you're not meant for overseas teaching for lengthy periods of time.
Number 8, you write, don't teach overseas if you're overly concerned for your safety.
Absolutely.
Tell us about that one.
Well, and we might have to take a break
Hold
here.
on a second.
You guys recording?
Yeah,
Come on
what's up?
in.
You want to come in?
You come on in.
I just want to introduce you.
Bring him in. We'll
ladies
just
and
edit this out
gentlemen,
later.
We're very excited. We have an interview right on the spot. We've got a brand new family.
I think I just hit
coming
pause,
in.
right? Can I just turn him off? Can I turn him off right now somehow?
No, just a little
How
roll.
do I turn him off?
Just a little roll. Hi.
I have no idea where we were. We're on number 8 or
Hold
something.
on, let's start over. Let's start over with number 8.
Let's
start
start
over. Hey,
Hey,
it's
it's a podcast.
Ken the Cat Guy here with you, with Greg the Single Guy.
God, that's
so
funny.
number 8.
Nice people, man, right?
You write. Yes, that was very nice. Number 8. You write. Don't go overseas to teach if you are overly concerned for your safety. Now, just tell us about this briefly.
Well, I guess the first time I went overseas, I was in Honduras, and safety was an issue in San Pedro Sula. It was a city, and when I decided to leave overseas, and everybody's looking up information, all your friends and family start researching it, and they start looking at the CIA website and all these warnings and stuff, and some of that might be real, but when you actually live there, safety can be an issue, and any big city is a safety issue, right? But you can't be that concerned about it. I think, how's the best way to put this? I think you learn to live in certain places, but you can't avoid, some places you can't avoid having safety issues. And you learn to live there, right? But you have to go through a process and get used to living there. So I wouldn't shy away from places. That's just me. I wouldn't shy away from places that are a little bit more dangerous.
put
But
you on
I
the
don't
spot.
have a family, right?
Well, let me put you on the
With me.
spot, and that part is
Kids.
a well stated that you don't have a family. It's just you. But let me put you on the spot. Is there anywhere in the world, all things being equal, we're not judging schools, we're judging cities and countries. Is there any place in the world that you would not teach currently?
North Korea. Ukraine.
Yeah. Right. Well, we do have teachers in Ukraine. We still have teachers in Russia too,
Well,
don't we?
for me, it's not
Yeah.
an issue of safety. I know that if I give you an example, when I lived in San Pedro Sula, it was a very violent country, very violent city, enough that we had to walk in groups at night, if we walked at all at night. We had to be in groups, and we had to have phone chains just to keep safe. We had some people that were held up at gunpoint or at knife point. But that's a big city, even like New York, right, or Chicago downtown. And I don't get worried about things like that. But there's very few places I wouldn't live because of safety for me. But if I had kids, I would be a little bit more worried about raising kids in places like that. Although I have friends that had kids in places like that, right? It's a difficult thing, but I think the people that overly worry about safety are the ones that need to think twice about going overseas, because our idea of safety is different. That's the caveat. Our idea of safety or a safe living might be different than somebody else's, right?
I will say that after you spend time living overseas, you learn to read the government warnings with a critical eye.
Absolutely. I don't even watch the news about countries that I live in because it's ridiculous. There's safety in information of multiple sources too. So listen to multiple sources. Don't go to the CIA websites necessarily, because they have to be very cautious, because they don't want to have issues with people. I don't know where else to go with this part of the conversation.
Number
It's
9. Well, moving
tough.
on.
Yeah, move on.
Move right along. Number 9 is, I think what you're saying with number 9 is, don't teach overseas if you can't go without your comfort where you're currently at. The creature comforts that you have to, that if you can't change your expectations for your daily comforts, maybe international teaching is not for you. What do you think?
Well, I definitely agree with that. I wrote it, right?
This crap
Next
anyway.
question. Who wrote this crap? No, I just think about the person that lands in a country, name any country, and you're like, oh my God, I can't find my cereal. You know, these first world problems, like I can't find my name brand toothpaste. If you can't go without that stuff, then you don't need to be traveling. You need to travel short periods and bring it with you. On the other hand, as an international teacher, you learn that you love certain things and you bring them with you.
What's an example? You were just going to say this. What's an example of something that you might bring with you from the States?
Well, when I lived in Venezuela, and Matt will attest to this too, when I lived in Venezuela, I loved toilet paper, and I decided to bring my own toilet paper because they didn't have any down there. So, that's an extreme example. They had shortages of things, right?
Yes.
I think it's important. I've brought lots of things even to Switzerland. I had friends still living in Switzerland, and I had access to some American goods. I brought chocolate chip morsels. The chocolate chip cookies, the Hershey's chocolate chip cookies everybody eats. In Switzerland, they have real chocolate, and it's not meant to melt into a cookie the same way that we like our Toll House cookies. That's something that someone just enjoyed. Not that they needed, not that they couldn't live without it, but it was just something, it's a comfort food that I brought as a gift because they didn't have it there and they did miss it. Even for you, there's certain things that we love to have, we can't bring in or we don't have here that you have to get used to not living with.
What's that candy, the chocolate peppermint
Patties?
patties? You ever had those?
Yeah.
I've never seen them here. Have you?
No, I never have either.
And so we got a teacher down the hallway who brings these in from the U.S. I sneak into her office after school.
Eat all
I
of
know
them?
myself.
Of course. And food is a top issue. But I'll tell you here's another issue, Kent. This is very interesting. There are some countries that don't have, like for tampons, for example.
Yeah.
And people don't want to talk about that. But hey, it's an issue. If you're a woman that's always using tampons and does not use pads or anything else, it's tampons. That's how your life works. You're going to have to import them. But if you can't live without them, you might think twice about moving to certain countries that just don't have it. And there might be many different reasons for not having them. On the other hand, I'll sum this whole thing up. If you're not comfortable with your comfort stuff back at home and you've been raised on it, you always have it, you can't sleep without it, right? It might be a certain mattress, it might be, you can't sleep, you can't do anything without it, right? Then don't leave. But the other hand is that the best part of teaching overseas is not having everything the same and not having all your comfort stuff and exploring new things to make you happy.
You might find that you like the new things better.
Absolutely. You know, I love Vegemite now. They don't have any peanut butter, available in some places. Some places just don't have peanut butter. I love Vegemite now. I didn't have access to peanut butter at the time. It was awesome.
I did not know this about you.
Some places you go and they don't have your favorite XYZ, but you try what they have instead, and you might have some new comforts that are,
Number 10.
Oh,
Number
here we
10
go.
on your list.
Almost through the list.
Number 10, you write, do not sign up for teaching overseas if you're on your own for retirement savings.
If you haven't built something up or started something, there's some schools, very few schools, I want to say very few schools don't have any kind of program for savings whatsoever for retirement. You're basically, I guess, however I stated that question, that overseas you're in charge of your own future, right? So you need to make sure you set up money aside, whether it's offshore or back in the States or however you're going to do it. You need to be the planner for that. And if you're not comfortable doing that, then don't go overseas.
Was one of our previous guests, we had Andrew Hellam on the podcast.
Absolutely.
And he is big. He talks about it's very hard to beat the U.S. retirement system.
Absolutely.
Going overseas. The lure for what looks like greater money, which looks like a better lifestyle, it's hard to beat the U.S. Social Security system and teacher pension system. Although I will say that I have talked to some teachers these days who, have worked for 15 years and have barely any pension to show for it. But in general, if you're sitting in the United States and you're earning a teacher pension, you're earning into Social Security, it's hard to beat going overseas.
I agree with you on that. I think that going overseas is great, but you have to plan you have to be your own financial planner. They're not just, it's not like you're sitting in the States and you work for the same school system for years and then you retire and you have your retirement put in and everything and they're matching or they're doing whatever and it's been planned out for you and they keep taking out of your paycheck. Some schools you work for, they're not taking anything out. You're saving money on taxes because you're not paying taxes up to $104,000, but it's up to you that you might be saving that. Maybe you should take whatever you pay in taxes and you should be putting that aside somewhere and making money off of it and saving it. But no one's going to tell you exactly how to do that. It's up to you to learn how you're going to handle that. So your choice to go overseas means that you're giving up that protectorate of planning for your future, whether it's by force or by just not even paying attention to it. It just happens in the States. Doesn't happen overseas.
And I will tell you that as a teacher the cat guy here loves to spend money. So
Yes,
I will
you do.
say that advice is good for a first-year international teacher or someone who's done it for 20 years because that's advice that I could really use to follow.
Well, I tell you what, you should read The Millionaire Expat before you go overseas.
Andrew Hellam, the millionaire expat.
You really should. And it's a wonderful, he also has a book called Balance, which you should read. And balance is balance between life and enjoying life and being happy and going for that making the money.
Well, that was the top 10 list as written by Greg Lemoine.
Of not to go overseas.
Oh, the top 10 list of reasons to not teach overseas, as written by Greg Lemoine in Finding the Right Fit.
Are we going to do the other list
at
now?
www.com. No, we'll save that list for another day. www.com, www.amazon.com, wherever you get your finer books.
So let's join us for another episode when we go over the other more exciting list, the reasons that you should go overseas.
And we'll have a special announcement for how you could participate more in the International Teacher Podcast.
You sound so formal when you do that part of the podcast. You know that? It's like you're so worried about like saying it correctly. I love that about you. I really do. It's fantastic. So what are we going to talk about now?
Well, I think this podcast is done.
Are we done now?
We did an hour. How much
Let's get
more
out
you
of here.
want- How much you want to do? You want to do another hour?
No. I can talk to you for hours. Hey, it's a new podcast.
Hey, welcome
This
to the
is
International Teacher
part
Podcast.
part 74.
Greg has a family now.
14 hours later.